there's always going to be disappointment when a relationship ends. And that's actually one of the things that makes it so hard for us to move on, because for a lot of us, we don't really deal with our disappointments. We can have coping skills that aren't necessarily good for us. They might get us through a moment, which is okay. But the hope is that we go back and look at those disappointments and make sense of them. So for you, pay attention. How do you normally deal with disappointments? Sometimes we can eat. Sometimes we just binge television shows. Sometimes we exercise really hard a lot, or maybe we use a substance, right? There's lots of ways that we try to cope with a disappointment. But when it comes to a breakup, when we don't look at the disappointment and acknowledge them, make sense of them, feel them, and then let them go, right? It makes it really hard to move on from our breakup. So today I want to talk about how to deal with the disappointment and give you a few tips and some exercises that you can do to begin to deal with your disappointment. All of this comes from I Can't Believe How Much This Hurts. You can find it in the link. It's on Amazon or on my website. There's also a course. Today we're going to look at chapter 5, starts on page 22. So in looking at a disappointment, you can have sadness and you can also have tenderness. So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie like Seabiscuit. That's just one that always comes to mind. That pain you feel when you watch a movie like that is tender, right? So you're crying, but it's not sad. I mean, yes, there are definitely some sad parts, but it's like that, that sometimes it can even be like a triumphant feeling or just something that really pulls at your heartstrings, right? So you can have pain that's sadness and you can have pain that's tenderness. Sometimes when we reflect back on a relationship as we're thinking about how disappointing it all maybe ended for us, you can feel some of that tenderness, and sometimes you're feeling some of the sadness. So it's kind of nice to be able to separate those two and tease out some of the memories and emotion and put them in the right category, because that begins to allow our brain to make sense of it so that we can move on from it. The other part of a disappointment is hope. Usually when we start a relationship, we start it with a lot of hope, and it's a lot of future hope. We're making plans for like where we're gonna, get a cabin, or when we retire, all the places we're gonna go see, or what we're gonna do with grandkids if we had kids, right? Even if you haven't had children and you plan on having children, all the things you're gonna do with your kids, right? There's always just this down the road future hope that we tend to talk about, and that's part of bonding, right? That's a good thing, that's a healthy thing when you have a relationship, especially in the beginning. But when it ends, it's like that spider web of hope, because from one hope comes like 3 more, and from those 3 more, and from those 3, right? So you kind of have this ripple effect, or like what I call a spider web of hope, when a relationship ends and you're left kind of hanging in all of that. And some hopes, if you've ever heard the expression, some hopes die hard, it's true. Sometimes that is what's keeping us from, or preventing us from moving on, is just that hope that we had, all the things we were gonna do, right? That is super painful to have to think about how it's just not gonna happen, at least with that person, at least up to this point. Who knows what the future holds, right? But as for today, if your relationship is done and it's over, it's ended, we have to look at, wow, these are some things I'm just never gonna do. Right? These are some places we're just never going to go. Doesn't mean I'm not going to go there, but at least with this person, probably not going to happen. So if you want to look at page 23, it talks about the tenderness. Some of the questions that go along with tenderness, these are writing prompts. You could write them down in a notebook, on your phone. The biggest thing is I wouldn't just think about it. It's very different to just think about it than it is to actually write it down and look at it. Once you write it down and you can see what you've written, even if you type it out, it's very different when the information kind of comes back to us. It's a bit more clear, right? So some of the questions is, will anything ever compare to how good and perfect those moments were? So when you think back to the good moments, that's the tender part. That's the part that pulls at your heartstrings. It can lead into sadness, right? But it's those good, tender moments that you so enjoyed with this person, no matter how long ago they occurred. That's something to look at. Will anything ever compare to how good and perfect those moments were? I think I read that. Will anyone ever know me better than the other person did, right? Depending how long you've been with your partner, when it ends, You kind of feel like, "Ugh, I don't want to have to start all over. I felt like they knew me so well. They knew me at some of these really hard times. How am I ever going to explain that to somebody else again? I actually don't want to explain that again," right? So these are some of the components that go into our disappointment, right? I'm really disappointed because I thought like that was it. This was my person. I wasn't going to ever have to explain this to another person again. Very disappointing. Let's see. Another one is, will I ever feel this way again? Is my ex struggling like I am? Right? We want to know, like, did this matter to you? Are you as messed up over this as I feel like I am? Are you as hurt by this as I am? So these are some of the things that are tender, pull at our heartstrings. If we're looking more at the sad parts, right? The sadness is thinking about places that break your heart or activities that make you really sad. You could also examine some of the shame you experienced in the relationship. What was something you compromised on that you kind of wished you wouldn't have, and now you have some shame over it? So shame is the pain we experience as a result of a humiliation. Could be a humiliation we do to ourselves, or maybe it was a humiliation that was done to us. But the pain you experience because of the humiliation, that is what shame feels like, right? So if you think about any of the shame, that can make us very sad when we reflect. Let's see, let me give you one more. If you abandoned yourself, was there any part of the relationship where you could have abandoned your beliefs, you could have abandoned your values, you could have abandoned your voice, right? Anywhere that you're feeling really sad that it took you to that place where you were willing to abandon yourself, if that happened, right? That can make us sad now. And it's really disappointing. And some of the disappointment can be in ourself. I think that's probably pretty common, right? To have a relationship end, because if you are trying, chances are you were probably trying to compromise, and that line can just move and move and move and move until you find yourself at a place you never dreamed you could be at. I think that can happen often, right? So we're looking at the tenderness, we're looking at the sadness, and then we're also going to look at the loss of hope. So what are some plans that you had that, looking at now, we're trying to get to a place where we can accept that's just not going to happen? And again, if this is ever too overwhelming for you, then you could take a break, right? You could take a walk, go talk to someone else, just put it down, put your writing down, and go do something else for a period of time. Or if it's too overwhelming, then seek help in your area, find a local therapist, and you can watch the last video for a broader list of resources that are available to you, especially if money is a barrier, which I know oftentimes it can be a barrier into getting into therapy. But there are resources available for you and to you if you put a little bit of the work in to try and find a place. So you don't have to go through it alone. If you're really struggling, I really encourage you to seek help, to reach out and seek help. But if you're like, I can get through this, it's just annoying, or I just don't want to, have to really look at it. Maybe you're just not ready, and that's okay too. These are exercises for when you're ready, and a lot of times you're baby stepping through them, right? It's not doing the whole thing at once, it's just baby steps. So I hope you found those tips helpful, at least thinking in terms of, oh yeah, what hope do I have to face that's just not going to happen? Because as I start to acknowledge that, and I don't want to say admit, but sort of like recognize that this just is not going to happen, I start to kind of clear out some of those cobwebs, right? And then I start to see a little clearer, and then I start to heal and feel a bit better and better every day. So you can get through this. I know it hurts, and I am so sorry that you are going through this. Nobody starts a relationship for it to end, right? And so when it ends, it can be very devastating and really difficult to face. But we know that we can get through it. There is life on the other end of it. Sometimes it's usually just a process. So again, I can't believe how much this hurts. You can find it on Amazon. Take good care, and I'll see you in the next one.